Ever dreamt of hitting the pause button on life and hitting play again in the future? That's the possibility that cryonics dangles in front of us.
Yeah.
And today, we're diving deep into your research
Okay.
on this chilling and, let's be honest,
Yeah.
somewhat sci-fi concept.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea that we might one day outsmart death
Wow.
itself by harnessing extreme colds.
Oh.
Of course, as with any bold claim about the future, there's a spectrum of opinions on whether cryonics is cutting-edge science or just plain fantasy.
Right from the get-go, it sounds like we're dealing with more what-ifs than concrete answers.
Yeah.
So for those new to this,
Sure.
let's define it.
Okay.
What exactly is cryonics?
In the simplest terms, cryonics involves using ultra-low temperatures to preserve human bodies after legal death with the hope of eventual revival.
So it's not just about freezing, but freezing with a purpose, with the expectation that someday, somehow, science will figure out how to undo the process.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this is where the skepticism from the mainstream scientific community comes in.
Yeah.
Right now, the technology to revive a cryopreserved human simply doesn't exist.
That's a pretty significant hurdle to overcome.
It is.
It makes you wonder, what are the core assumptions, the beliefs that fuel the cryonics movement, even with this technological barrier?
The cryonicists believe that our consciousness, our memories, our very essence are all encoded in the physical structure of our brains.
Interesting.
They argue that if we can preserve that intricate structure down to the connections between neurons, then theoretically future technology could extract and potentially even reactivate that information.
So it's almost like believing that the human essence is like data on a hard drive.
Yeah.
And even if the drive is damaged, the data itself might still be salvageable with the right tools.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And just like with a damaged hard drive, the success of data recovery depends on the extent of the damage.
Right.
Cryonics faces a similar challenge, preserving the brain, or the body for that matter, in a state that retains enough information for potential future revival.
Speaking of preserving the body, how does the actual cryopreservation process work? Is it as simple as parking a body in a giant freezer?
If only it were that straightforward.
Okay.
The actual process is surprisingly complex.
Okay.
First and foremost, cryopreservation can only begin after someone is legally declared dead.
So there's a limited window to begin the procedure.
Yes.
Time is of the essence.
Absolutely.
Wow.
One of the key techniques used is called vitrification.
Okay.
Instead of freezing, which forms damaging ice crystals, vitrification uses cryoprotective agents, chemicals that prevent ice formation, essentially transforming the body into a glass-like state.
So instead of ice crystals that could damage cells, you're aiming for a smooth transition into a state of suspended animation, minimizing cellular disruption.
Exactly. Think about what happens when you freeze a strawberry. It becomes mushy, right?
Right.
That's due to ice crystal formation.
Yeah.
Cryoprotectants like glycerol or ethylene glycol, which you might recognize from antifreeze, help prevent that kind of damage at a cellular level.
So it's all about preserving those intricate structures within the brain, protecting them at the microscopic level.
Right.
But even with vitrification, it's still a gamble, right?
It is.
I imagine there are limitations to even the most advanced preservation techniques.
You're right. Even vitrification isn't foolproof.
Right.
It's still debated whether it causes more damage than we currently understand. There's research into even more refined methods, such as using chemical fixation to further stabilize tissues.
Okay.
It's a field under constant development.
It sounds like even the pause button in this scenario has its technical glitches. But let's say for the sake of argument that we perfect these preservation techniques.
Okay.
Where does this cryopreservation actually take place? Are we talking high-tech labs, secret underground bunkers?
While it might sound like something out of science fiction, cryopreservation facilities are real places.
Really?
Some of the more well-known ones include Alcor in Arizona,
the
Cryonics Institute in Michigan, and even Cryoris in Russia.
Wow.
Proof that this fascination with cheating death transcends borders.
It's a global endeavor. I had no idea these facilities even existed.
Right.
So they take these incredibly delicate, vitrified bodies and store them for centuries.
You got it. These facilities are essentially high-tech morgues equipped to store bodies at extremely low temperatures,
Wow.
usually in liquid nitrogen for potentially hundreds of years.
Okay, let's shift gears from the mind-boggling science to something a bit more, well, practical.
Okay.
This all sounds incredibly expensive.
It is.
Who's footing the bill for this deep freeze into the future?
You're right. Cryopreservation is not for the faint of wallet. The costs can vary, but you're looking at tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the provider and the procedures involved. It's a substantial investment, to be sure.
Yeah.
Many people opt to fund their cryopreservation through life insurance policies,
Right.
paying premiums throughout their lives, so that the payout upon their death covers the costs.
Oh, that's one way to plan for the future, I suppose.
Yeah.
But even if someone can afford it,
Yeah.
and even if these facilities can maintain these deep freezes for centuries,
Yeah.
there's still this massive elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
The technology to actually revive someone doesn't exist.
You've hit on the crux of the matter.
Right.
Cryonics is entirely reliant on faith in future technology.
Yeah.
A gamble that science will eventually solve a puzzle that at this point we're still trying to fully comprehend.
And it's not just the revival itself, right?
Right.
It's the question of what happens after a potential revival. What
Yeah.
kind of world are we talking about in, say, a century or two?
Right.
Would it even be a world someone would want to be revived into?
Now you're venturing into the realm of not just scientific unknowns,
Right.
but societal and existential ones as well.
Right.
The world a few centuries from now could be radically different from the one we know.
Yeah.
The values, the culture, the very fabric of society could undergo transformations we can only begin to imagine.
It's almost impossible to grasp, right?
Yeah.
Someone could wake up centuries from now and feel like a complete alien in their own world.
It begs the question,
Wow.
what does consent even mean in the context of cryonics?
Right.
Can someone truly consent to be revived in a world they know nothing about?
Right.
A world where their values and beliefs might be as outdated as a rotary phone.
It's mind-boggling.
Get it?
And we haven't even touched on the practical implications.
Right.
Let's say revival does become possible.
Okay.
What kind of support systems would these revived individuals need?
Yeah.
Could they integrate into a society that's moved on without them?
These are questions with no easy answers.
Right.
Questions that would likely spark intense debate and perhaps even social upheaval.
Wow.
Imagine the legal battles over inheritance.
Right.
The challenges of assimilating individuals from different eras with different social norms.
Yeah.
It's uncharted territory.
It sounds like a recipe for chaos, honestly.
It really does.
And this all hinges on technology that might never materialize.
Right.
It makes you wonder why cryonics has captivated the imaginations of so many, despite these daunting uncertainties.
The allure of immortality,
Mm-hmm.
even a potential one, is a powerful motivator.
Sure.
And cryonics taps into that deep-seated human desire to transcend our limits, to cheat death itself.
Right.
But beyond the allure, there's a historical thread to unravel.
Okay.
A story of how this idea took root and evolved over time.
So how did we get from ancient myths of immortality to high-tech facilities storing bodies at sub-zero temperatures? Where does the cryonic story begin?
While humans have dreamt of conquering death for millennia,
Right.
the modern concept of cryonics, this idea of preserving bodies for future revival began to take shape in the mid-20th century.
Okay.
And a pivotal figure in this story is a man named Robert Edinger.
Edinger. Does that name ring a bell? I feel like I've come across it in my research.
He's often referred to as the father of cryonics.
Okay.
In 1962, he published a book titled The Prospect of Immortality,
Wow.
which essentially launched cryonics into the public consciousness.
The Prospect of Immortality.
Yeah,
It's a bold title, certainly attention-grabbing.
it is.
But Edinger wasn't just a writer, was he?
No.
Didn't he put his beliefs into action?
He absolutely did.
Huh.
In 1976, he founded the Cryonics Institute in Michigan,
Okay.
which is still operational today.
Wow.
It was a testament to his conviction that cryonics, however speculative, held real promise for the future.
So not just talk, but action.
Right.
He truly believed in this idea enough to dedicate his life to it.
He did.
Are there any other significant milestones in the history of cryonics? Any events that shaped its trajectory?
One of the most well-known cases involves a man named James Bedford,
Okay.
a psychology professor who, in 1967, became the first person to be cryopreserved with the explicit intent of future revival.
1967.
Yeah,
That's just a few years after Edinger published his book.
it is.
Talk about an early adopter.
Right.
What happened to Bedford? Is he still on ice?
His case is fascinating because his body remains cryopreserved to this day.
Wow.
However, it's important to note that his cryopreservation was a rudimentary procedure compared to the vitrification techniques used today.
I imagine the technology has advanced quite a bit since 1967.
It has.
Yeah.
But even with those advancements, Bedford's case highlights the long game of cryonics, the inherent uncertainty of it all.
Right.
We simply don't know if revival will ever be possible,
Right.
let alone if those early attempts at cryopreservation preserved enough to make it feasible.
It's a story frozen in time, waiting for a future chapter that may never be written. It makes you wonder if those early pioneers of cryonics like Bedford fully grasped the magnitude of the gamble they were taking.
It's hard to say, but it's a gamble that others have taken since.
Right.
And like any gamble, there have been wins and losses along the way.
Wins and losses?
Yeah.
You make it sound like a sports game.
Well,
What kind of losses are we talking about in the context of cryonics?
I'm referring to some high-profile failures in the early days of cryonics that tarnished its reputation and raised serious questions about its viability.
Failures.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Okay.
What happened?
One notable case involved a facility called the Cryonics Society of California.
Okay.
In the 1970s, they ran into financial trouble and were unable to maintain their storage tanks.
Oh, no.
Tragically, the bodies they were storing thawed and decomposed.
Oh, that's awful.
It is.
I can only imagine the families of those individuals.
Yeah.
It must have been devastating.
It was a devastating setback for the field of cryonics, leading to lawsuits and a great deal of negative publicity.
Understandably so.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even with the best intentions, there are practical considerations, logistical hurdles that can't be ignored.
Precisely.
Wow.
Cryonics facilities are businesses, after all, subject to the same economic realities as any other company.
Right.
Their long-term sustainability, their ability to uphold the commitments they've made to their patients, is something that potential cryonics candidates need to consider carefully.
It adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate topic.
It does.
You're not just putting your faith in science, but in the long-term stability of these organizations. But even with the setbacks, the ethical dilemmas, the sheer uncertainty of it all, cryonics continues to capture the imagination, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It pops up in movies, books, TV shows.
Right.
It's become a staple of science fiction, a way for us to explore our anxieties and aspirations about life, death, and what might lie beyond.
It's like cryonics itself has been cryopreserved in our cultural consciousness, waiting for the right moment to thaw out and spark our curiosity again.
It's a testament to our enduring fascination with the idea of cheating death.
Right.
The possibility of a second act.
Right.
Even centuries down the line.
And speaking of second acts, haven't some pretty big names decided to roll the dice on cryonics?
They have.
I'm thinking of figures whose legacies loom large, even in death.
Right.
I think one of the most well-known cases is that of baseball legend Ted Williams. After his death in 2002, he opted for cryopreservation.
He did.
A decision that sparked both fascination and controversy.
It did?
Didn't his family have some disagreements about his final wishes?
They did.
It adds a whole other dimension to the ethical dilemmas surrounding cryonics.
There were indeed legal battles within the family over his remains.
Right.
Highlighting the complicated legal and emotional terrain that cryonics often navigates.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we're not just dealing with scientific concepts, but with human lives.
Right.
With families grappling with difficult choices and uncertain outcomes.
Right.
Were there other notable figures who chose this path? Perhaps individuals who, in their own lives, pushed boundaries and embraced the unknown.
Another intriguing case is that of Hal Finney, a software developer who played a pivotal role in the early days of cryptocurrency.
Right.
He was diagnosed with ALS and chose cryopreservation in 2014.
Wow.
His story intertwining with the rise of technologies that themselves feel almost futuristic.
Right. It's like something out of a science fiction novel. A pioneer in a cutting-edge field choosing to be preserved by another cutting-edge field.
Right.
Both grappling with the limits of what's possible.
Right.
It makes you wonder, are there any patterns in the types of people who are drawn to cryonics?
It's difficult to make generalizations.
Sure.
But it's fair to say that many cryonics proponents are individuals with a strong belief in the power of technology. Often those who in their own lives have embraced innovation and challenged conventional thinking.
It's not just individuals signing up for cryopreservation, is it?
Right.
There are organizations, institutions that are pushing the boundaries of this field
Yeah.
from a research and development perspective.
Right.
It feels like there's a whole ecosystem springing up around this idea.
Absolutely. You have organizations like the Brain Preservation Foundation,
Hmm.
which offers a substantial prize for advancements in brain preservation technology.
Wow.
Their focus is not necessarily on revival,
Okay.
but on proving that we can preserve the complex structures of the brain in a way that retains information.
So a focus on the pause button, proving that we can hit it effectively, even if we're not sure what the play button will look like or
Right.
when we might be able to press it.
Precisely.
Wow.
Their work is pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the brain and the nature of consciousness,
Right.
regardless of whether cryonics in its current form ever becomes a reality.
It's a fascinating intersection of science, technology, ethics, even philosophy.
It is.
And it seems like every answer we uncover just leads to more questions, more layers to peel back.
It does.
As we start to wrap up our deep dive today, is there a final, perhaps provocative thought you'd like to leave our listener with something to ponder as they continue to explore this chilling, complex topic?
What strikes me is that cryonics forces us to confront a question that has haunted humanity for as long as we've been able to contemplate our own mortality.
Okay.
What does it truly mean to be human?
Right.
Is it our physical bodies, our memories, our experiences,
Right.
or something more intangible, something that even the most advanced technology might never capture?
Right.
Cryonics doesn't provide an answer,
Right.
but it throws that question into sharp relief,
Yeah.
challenging us to grapple with the mystery of our own existence.
It's a question without an easy answer, a question that will likely continue to spark debate and fuel our imaginations for generations to come. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the chilling world of cryonics. It's clear that this concept, rife with ethical quandaries and technological hurdles, continues to fascinate and challenge our perceptions of life, death, and the potential for a second act. Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking journey. Until next time.